Hey everyone, welcome to Talking Headless. I'm Paul Greenberg, and this is episode 19. You know what? I'm almost 75, so forgive me if my numbers don't work sometimes. But we have as always, a fantastic episode. I'll talk about our guests in just a minute or two, but let me give you a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. First, normally, this evening at 7 p.m., we would have Engaged with Paul and Kenny. And our guest this week will be Michael Berg, who is a producer, a director, a screenwriter in Hollywood, and is known for all the Ice Age movies back in the early aughts and teens of the 21st century. Um, he's a wonderful man, from what I understand. I mean, Kenny has been a friend of his for a long time. And because of scheduling, that will be instead of tonight at 7 p.m., that will be Thursday, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. instead. Secondly, tomorrow on CRM Players, uh, Brent and I will be talking about our impressions and our thoughts on Cloud World 2024 from Oracle, Dreamforce 2024 from Salesforce, Verint Engage, hopefully inbound HubSpot, and also John Reed, the Brohammer, is going to join us to talk about the Workday Rising conference. So we have a number of really good shows coming up. My guests today, although they're not in the green room yet, so I can't say that they're going to be here until they're here, are Sarita Kincaid, who's the VP of Corporate Communications for SugarCRM. I will talk about her a little later in the show when she comes on. And Martin Schneider, who is an analyst at Constellation Research, who covers Salesforce automation, areas of CRM basically, and customer experience that Liz Miller complements at Constellation. Liz is more on the marketing side, and I'd say both of them are pretty involved in service. I've known both Martin and Sarita for a long time, and they're both wonderful people, and I'm very much looking forward to having them. Now, Sarita's not here yet. I'm going to check in and see why not, actually. So give me a second. And in the meantime, what I will do is talk to you a little bit about what you can expect, give you a little taste of the discussion on Oracle and Salesforce tomorrow, because honestly, that is going to be pretty amazing. So, needless to say, with both Salesforce and Oracle, AI was it, right? I mean, but what was interesting was the approaches were very different. So at Cloud World, Oracle kind of took the approach of, okay, AI, here's all the work you do. That's the context. Here's everything that you do. AI will be, if you're using our technology, AI will be infused into everything that you do to help improve and augment what you do, make your work life better. And to kind of indicate that this is the way it's being done is you will get all of Oracle's AI capabilities, including Gen AI, for free. It'll come as upgrades to whatever technologies you happen to be using of theirs, and that is a big plus. Salesforce took a somewhat, it was sort of the same thing, but different. Salesforce said, here's AI. And one of the things it will do is help you work better. Now, that might sound the same, but it's actually quite different. Oracle was actually inculcating AI into the work that you do, where Salesforce was talking about AI and that it could supplement the work that you do. So the context, the framework in Oracle's case was work that you do, and in Salesforce cases was AI. Now, that said, Salesforce AI, which is now Agent Force, is not going to be free, although there will be some elements that will be. It, though, will be available for all the different Salesforce solutions that you use and will be part of the platform. And in that regard, both of them were um, clear that this would be infused deeply into all the solutions in the platforms and into the cloud offerings that both companies have. Now, what was interesting on the Oracle side was that they didn't they didn't they didn't actually have any real discussion about the impact on the customer experience with the inculcation of AI into the work that you do. Where Salesforce, while they didn't say it, actually emphasized it to a large degree. They did 3 extraordinary demos of their Agent Force capabilities that were probably, and this will be discussed in more detail tomorrow, the best demos I've seen for, I don't know, this year maybe, and even prior to that. So Oracle was very much focused around effectiveness and efficiency. Salesforce was also focused around, it kind of did put a greater emphasis on the CX side of, and the impact on customer experience and employee experience that AI would have without being explicit about it. So there were pluses and minuses on both sides. If I'm looking at the overall approach, I'm giving it to Oracle in this one, that AI is just something that will improve the work you're doing and the work that you can be doing. Where Salesforce was really pushing a little bit on the high end of the hype of AI, not too badly, but a little bit, and then calling work one of the things that AI will improve, which is, both of them are true, but Oracle's approach is more, let's call it, fundamental and elementary, and probably the better approach. That said, where Salesforce was able to bring out the impact on customer employees, Oracle didn't really do that, and I think Salesforce did a better job there. One thing I found, I'd say, missing on both sides, but it was particularly noticeable with Salesforce because it's something they've never missed before, was the philanthropic efforts that the two companies, or Salesforce in particular, make. Every year you would see something related to philanthropy with Salesforce in the keynote by Mark. This year, unless I fell asleep, which is always possible, although it wasn't a bad keynote, unless I fell asleep, Salesforce actually didn't even mention philanthropy, and that was, to be honest, a little disturbing. The reason it was disturbing is the philanthropic efforts, the efforts for social good, have been part of Salesforce's culture for the entirety of its existence. And this Dreamforce is the first one I can remember. I think I've been to 14 maybe of the 21. I didn't go to the earliest ones. This is the first one I can remember that didn't mention philanthropy in the keynote at all. He didn't interview the people doing good, nothing like that. Last year, not this year, but last year, Oracle, with Larry Ellison, gave the best speech he's ever given, and sadly, last year is still the best speech he's ever given. Last year, Oracle actually talked about the good they're doing when it came to agriculture in particular, and energy and a couple of other areas, and a little bit on sustainability, which was actually a departure from their norm, but was not only well regarded, but actually immensely positively regarded, to the point where it had a real impact on people's, let's say, good faith with Oracle. This year, Larry went back to ones and zeros and went through this highly technical thing on zero, I think it was zero trust latency, packet latency or something like that, which they called zipper, which is a horrible name for everything. I mean, zero trust packet latency means I have no trust in what Oracle can do for me with packet latency, whatever the hell. And zipper is arguably the name that sets you up for the most horrible puns and jokes ever. But philanthropy was not, no, Oracle had that one shining moment in 2023 where they brought it out, dropped it again. Salesforce didn't mention it, which is telling you that larger companies are, they may talk stakeholder all day and night, but they're shareholder companies. And Salesforce still maintains a lot of its great culture. The AR team continues to be the best in the world. Oracle's done some remarkable things with their CX technology under the tutelage of Rob Tarkoff. But all in all, what can I say? Oracle, all in all, Oracle and Salesforce are, at the end of the day, as Bob Stutz would say, are shareholder companies, right? And that impacts what they do, how they do it, and the way they approach the world. I think Salesforce got scared into being one last year with all the layoffs and the activist investors coming full bore at them when they were down for a while. Look, to Salesforce's great credit, they've regained a ton of the trust that they had lost last year. People are, I don't want to say back to what it was, but they're pretty close. But what they haven't done yet, and hopefully will do, is to begin to expand on their culture. As Ray Wang of Constellation has this thing about, I think he calls it, and Martin Schneider, when we get on, maybe can help me with that, and that'll be in a couple of minutes. Ray has this thing he calls asymmetric advantage, right? Meaning it's something that you have as a company. Martin's nodding in the green room, so I know I'm right. There's something you have as a company that gives you a unique advantage in the marketplace. It's a true differentiator, one way or the other. Salesforce's culture was its asymmetric advantage, which might sound funny because usually it's tied to something like Zoho's pricing, although Zoho's culture is also another advantage they have. Things like that, which give you this big, gap between you and the rest of the market because it's such a big, unusual, big, and different advantage in the marketplace. Their culture has always been their asymmetric advantage. Ray may define it a little differently than I do. I'm taking his thing and running with it, but because I love the term. But they need to regain that. Oracle needs to re-emphasize the impact on employees and customers, even though, again, I think they took the smarter approach when it came to AI will be infused into the work that you do and that you want to do, right? As opposed to, we got AI, it'll help you work. So AI isn't the thing, work is the thing, which is what this technologies are supposed to be about, to enable you to do your work better. So with that, look, right now, I'm not sure what happened with Sarita. She probably had something that came up. So you know what we'll do is we'll start a little early with Martin and we'll bring him on. But before we bring him on, I want to introduce him. I've known Martin Schneider forever. I'm not going to tell you what we discussed at our first meeting, but it was at Le Colonial in San Francisco at a NetSuite event. And Martin at the time was working for 451 Group. And now, just to be clear, that's going to be the 451 Group thing is going to be, in effect, part of this discussion with Martin today. But we hit it off right away for many, many reasons. Now, one thing I know about Martin, and I've always known about Martin, is that his depth is astounding. I mean, and now the thing, look, 451, if you go back then, now he's working, of course, as I mentioned, with Constellation as principal analyst. But 451, if you go back then, was very technical. It was kind of a technical analyst firm. I remember thinking, boy, these guys dig deep into product. The thing with Martin was not only did he get the depth of the product, but he also understood the broader strategic implications of the company, which is not the norm at 451. There's one analyst there now who is kind of like that, which is Cheryl Kingstone. But Martin nailed it at every level. So I got to know him. We got to be great friends. I remember being very happy when he married his love of his life, Clara, right? Now they have a couple of kids. I mean, it's like, I've been there to see all of that. And I love the guy. I absolutely love the guy. Now, one thing you do not know about Martin, which we will talk about, is his, let's just say this. When you meet Martin ordinarily, he's always wearing long sleeve shirts. That's all I'll say right now. We'll get to that in a little while. With that, I'd like to introduce to you, if you don't already know him, Martin Schneider from Constellation.
Wow, what an illustrious intro, Paul. I appreciate it.
Here's the thing, it's funny. I love doing the intros because I know people like I know you, right? At the depth and level and length I've known you. So I know a lot to talk. There's a lot to talk about, and I got you, right? I got you from the second we started to talk.
Yeah, we were.
I knew it. It was right away. Away. So tell me, recently a Constellation now.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
You've kind of been through the whole route. I mean, the end to end. You've been on the vendor side. I'd say the biggest vendor has been with SugarCRM, but with multiple, a couple of others. And you've also been on the analyst side, which is even more interesting. 451, you trying to work with a company to create analyst thing, but it was a different mindset. And now Constellation. One of the things I've always wondered, because I know, for example, the model of 451 and the model of Constellation are really different, and kind of the way they, not just what they cover, of course, will overlap, but the way they cover it's really different. And yet you did both. So can you talk a little bit to that? Because that's hard. And, you basically have to change the way your mind is working. So can you fill me in on like the differences, how you deal with it, et cetera, because I think people would love to hear.
Yeah, sure. I'll probably have a guest here. My 5-year-old's home from school, so he's going to pop in.
Hey, hi.
Yeah. Hey, buddy.
Wow.
Wow.
Hey,
hi.
Chill, I'll grab whatever you need in a minute.
Hi.
Okay. So, what was interesting about how 451 started versus kind of how Constellation started is, and that's kind of where that difference is. Like when 451 first started, it was news analysis, right? And that's a big difference from like industry analysis and like taking that like more like Constellation was more like a Gartner or Forrester, still is in some ways, than 451 was trying to be, right? They called themselves technology fire starters and all that. And it was really trying to be very rapid fire and trying to be more in depth and holding vendors more accountable than like journalists did at the time, but also basically producing a lot, right? So, where your typical Gartner analyst, some of them only do what I would call like a report once a quarter, if that. We were doing 5 a week, right? And they were, and this is before blogging, right? So like, you gotta think of it as like we were basically doing like really well-crafted blog posts before anyone knew what that was. And they could have been anywhere from 500, 600, 700 words to a couple thousand. And then we started doing the long form reports, and then we started doing strategic analysis. So I would say like 451, well, it started as this very like rapid fire, cover a lot, have a ton of content to really show that we were on top of everything. It did evolve a little bit more into like the way other firms kind of looked. But at the end of the day, both Constellation and 451 are still, especially now, really about, going deep, learning a bit more. I think more and more both are trying to balance that user side and the vendor side to basically understand, well, how are the vendors coming together? Like what's the trend there? But then also where are the buyer necessities? What are we as end users needing? And where's the mismatch, right? Like where are those gaps, right? And I think, there was again, Ray started and did a lot of evaluation stuff. He started, I think, with more end user focus than, 451 didn't get into. They acquired companies like Uptime Institute and others. I can't remember all, and Yankee and all that were doing more end user summaries and things like that. So they kind of came from different areas, but I think if you look at them today, they'd probably look a lot more similar than even though they started at different times when they both started, right? So they kind of started in different ways, but I think at the end of the day, you wind up kind of building these analyst models where you're working with vendors, you're working with end users, you're working with like leaders and influencers, right? And now it's content, and it's content in multiple media. It's content, at different timings. It's events, right? Constellation pretty quickly got into doing the events like CCE and things like that. So we just did an event on Monday in New York with our AI 150 and telling that. So they're a lot more alike now, I think, than when they started. But the start was kind of interesting, right? Where you really were looking at kind of journalists becoming analysts was really what 451 was about. Yeah, and because I was the CRM magazine editor, and Nick Patience pulled me out and just said, hey, we like people who can write, right? I can write well and write often, but know the technology, right? Because there's, and I'm not going to name names or anything, but even today I'll be at conferences and a lot of times they mush the analysts and the media together.
Yeah.
And you'll talk to media and you're like, some of them are tech journalists and some of them know their stuff, but some of them are tech journalists who don't know their stuff. And some are like, they're just journalists. So it's like, I got sent to cover this and I don't know why. You know what I mean? So having that so being a journalist with a dedicated coverage area, going deep right now, that was really the 451 model, where I think like Constellation really kind of started out more like trying to be more of that traditional analyst where it's like you do help end users on evaluation and contracts and all that kind of stuff and really help them on their IT journey. We weren't really doing that at all at 451 to begin with, right? That wasn't really it.
The other thing I've noticed, and I'm not disparaging 451 here at all, because their model is their model, and they have, to me, one of the greats, which is Cheryl.
Yeah,
right. I love her. I think she's an amazing analyst.
I
remember when it came to. Yeah, well,
I remember we didn't work together. We like crisscrossed, and I hated it. Yeah.
When she was at Yankee, I remember I loved her for her coverage of mobile. Like she was the mobile.
Oh, yeah, she brought it out. I mean, she was probably the first person, if it wasn't for Cheryl's really articulating the idea of like, if you're shrinking down your Siebel screen to fit a phone, you're not going to win.
Right.
Like the idea of like form factor. It's like just step back and think form factor first. And then, and she had a lot of really and it's like Occam's razor, but no one else was thinking it. And she just kind of brought it out.
Yeah. And I love that. But I will tell you that right now, and then this may be just a set of circumstances for me, meaning given where the circles I'm in, the only time I ever see 451 anywhere is Cheryl. Outside of that, I don't see them anywhere. When I Constellation, I see everywhere. I see you. I see Liz. I see Holger. I see Doug. I see Andy. I see Ray. I see literally everyone.
Yeah.
At Constellation, everywhere, right? And it's a markedly different approach. Again, I'm not disparaging what 451 does, but at the same time, visibility level is very different, which also means the expectations are very different in terms of what they expect you to be doing out there, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. And I think, well, to your point, I think it's two things. One is 451 was never super deep in the applications. Like that was kind of, at one point I was the only one running applications there, right? And Nick had done some good stuff there, and but I think what is interesting about Constellation is how much they get. How like why is Chirag, why is Holger, why is Liz, why am I at the same event? It's because we do understand how like our coverage areas interlock among the same vendors, where it's like AI is everywhere, right? Like workflow is everywhere. You know what I mean? Like it's like CX means a lot of different things. Employee experience is part of CX, So I think we understand that kind of interlock, and we can understand how vendors have an interesting point to make there. So we're there for it. So I think that's one of the things there. I think, but you got a lot of really deep and really smart guys, and a lot of like what 451 does, goes like they go all the way back into like the data center and this and stuff still, and so maybe they don't see, there's just not a lot of overlap into that CX and application world, and there hasn't been much, like it was, back at when my time there, I was like the only one going to like Oracle events, going to Salesforce, that kind of thing. So
yeah, I mean, I am in, if I'm looking at models, I agree with Constellations considerably more on that basis, meaning it's just not a world. Look, even if you look at the way the vendors are speaking now, every one of them is at least acknowledging that companies are going to use technologies other than theirs. I mean, the idea of
that's the big message of Cloud World, right?
Yeah, Cloud World, and it was sort of the grudging message, even though highly competitive of Dreamforce, but it was a grudging agreement that that's going to happen, and we got MuleSoft, and so we can do that. Let's say this: the acknowledgement that it's not the world of best of breed ever anymore. That people are going to use what they use, and they have what they have. It doesn't mean the best of breed isn't the best answer for something. Sometimes it just simply means that nobody really does it, or let's say less companies do it than you would imagine. Why are you saying no? Yes.
Well, I mean, it depends. I think what I would say, if I'm looking at what I'm calling the holistic go-to-market tech stack, nobody owns that. There's literally no one who's doing what you need to do to manage your end-to-end go-to-market with one vendor. It's literally impossible, right? So I would say best of breed is by necessity in a lot of ways. If not, it's not design, right? I mean, you're looking at what Salesforce is trying to do that, right? Even the message, I think the anti-DIY message was cute, but I think their pipeline to paycheck message that they put out there around Sales Cloud is probably the most interesting wrinkle in terms of actual innovation that like a CRO can actually go and take advantage of in terms of what's coming out in their winter release. But we could talk for hours about that. But so I think but still at the end of the day, you need to truly manage. If you're a B2B company, you're using multiple you're doing a best of breed, whether you like it or not.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I meant actually single source. Not
yeah. Like there's
myself.
Yeah, there's no business.
I actually meant no,
right?
No. I mean, nobody's going to buy only SAP. I mean, I would say probably as far as the stack goes, even though they recognize it, probably one of the closest, and it's just by necessity, has been Oracle to a large degree, because they've been so foundational to so many companies for so long. Just out of inertia, they don't change, right? So I'm saying that again, when it comes, I'm sorry, I don't know why I was saying best of breed. In my head, I was saying single source.
I wanted to make sure that
No, in my head, I literally was saying something else. So, look, the reality that if you think about Constellation's model, that acknowledges that we're dealing with every company using multiple vendors, and they need to work together. And in fact, if you're going to cover them as an analyst, you got to kind of cover them together, to cover the areas, cover the companies, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that's and so many, platforms are winning, and platforms have multiple functional areas. And I can think of there's 5 or 6 vendors that everyone's heard of that's probably listening in on here, where almost every one of the analysts at Constellation is going to their events because they have something meaningful to say, and we have something that we want to hear and that we want to bring to both the end users, because that's what people are thinking about. And for me, looking at go-to-market, Liz and I are inextricably linked, right? Because like I'm new, and like she's still doing CPQ, right? So it's like, but we're both talking to pros, and we're both talking to like Vendavo. We're both, it's like that kind of thing. So it's, you really see where like marketing automation going into what I would call even like sales operations, not just SFA, middle office, integrating with back office, you can see, CX where EX employee experience comes in, and where AI and agentic AI is, how is that helping employees versus how is it helping customers, or both or neither, right? So it's, we're all powwowing on that. We've got, it's like the endless, because of like time differences and Holger being all over the world, Ray being all over, like our chat feeds are just like, we're collaborating on all this stuff, and it's super collaborative, which is really, that's what's really awesome. I love how collaborative it is.
Yeah, it's a good group. I mean, I've known Constellation since it was founded, and I'm actually sit on the board of advisors of the company, and have since day one. And it's fascinating to me to watch a company. Look, I remember, this is a very true story. It goes all the way back to E2O days, right? The Enterprise 2.0 conference was going on.
Oh yeah.
Me, Brent Leary, and Michael Thomas were doing a panel called Rock Stars of Social CRM for Radiant 6, right? Yeah, that's what I mean.
This
And
is like,
I got
ancient tech bingo. I love it.
and I got this call from Ray saying, "Hey, he was still at Forrester. I'm thinking of going independent. Do you mind telling me about being an independent?" And this is where I got introduced to. I knew Ray already, but it was more in passing. Like I ran into him at Sapphire, and we chat for a minute and move on. But we weren't close. Now we're very close. But what happened was, I get this call, and Ray said, "I said, well, I'm kind of doing this panel right now, tonight, and I can't do it. It's going to probably go till 10 o'clock." And he goes, "Can we talk after that?" And little did I know. So I said, "Sure." And I thought we talked from 10 to 11, go back to the hotel. That would be it. At 5:30 in the morning, I started walking back to my hotel. Right. And
sounds like right.
Yeah, no, it's Ray is the vampire.
I'm not sure he's human, because he's done things that defy the laws of physics. I saw him in Cupertino, and then he'll like text me from like Riyadh, and I'm I don't think you can get to the airport and get to Riyadh that fast.
Oh no, I was once at Microsoft. What was it called? What was it before it was 5 different conferences again? Converge. It was called Converge until it diverged, right? So I was at Converge, and Ray was there, and he said, "Listen, I have to leave. I'll be back tonight." And this was in Houston, right?
Houston, yeah.
Right. I have to leave. I'll be back tonight. Can you, if anyone asks about me, can you just cover for me? And I said, sure. So anyway, he leaves, comes back, and I said, "Where were you, by the way? Did you have to go on a meeting?" He said, "Yeah, I was in Miami." Right. He literally flew from Houston to Miami, gave a speech, and came back.
Yeah, he did like 3 events during Dreamforce. He like went out to work day. He like comes, it's amazing. It's the one thing I'm like, I'm taking a slow ramp here, and I'm kind of literally glad I'm kind of like ramping during a conference season where I'm only traveling once or twice a month, because I mean, Liz is all over. Holger's, like I said, I don't even know. I think he's in Paris for something right now. So
yeah, oh yeah. No, you probably have the most active analyst firm I've ever seen.
No, they're all over. Yeah, but no one does less than a couple 100,000 miles a year. Yeah,
that was my norm before COVID. I was doing 250 every year as global services on United for 7 years. Ray is lifetime global services, which is 4 million.
I'm surprised he doesn't just. He should just get a plane. It would be. Yeah. I think it would make more sense for him to get a plane.
I don't know if he'd have as much fun doing it that way, though. No, I think he weirdly likes it, but he does like it.
Well, I used to see him in the Centurion Lounge like all the time when I was on the vendor side traveling. And we would like, and but it'd be crazy because I'd see him like coming and like going, like I mean, like I'm coming. It's like in the air. I'm like, "Did you leave the airport?" And he's like, "Yeah, like 4 times since you've come back." It's like crazy.
Yeah, he's just it's an amazing thing. Well, so talk to this. So one of the things I think a lot of people don't know. So when you're dealing with, I think Gartner, Forrester, maybe IDC, I have like this breakdown. I've always done this: the institutional firms, there's the boutique firms, and then there's the independents. I put Constellation in boutique, even though it's functionally a little different. Well, it's boutique in size, not so much necessarily in model per se, which is why it's a little bit different than most boutique firms. I mean, a typical boutique firm would be like Ventana, right? That's a normal
Yeah,
boutique firm.
or like Dan stuff.
Dan's well,
Why am I
Dan's
forgetting
former stuff.
former
He's
stuff now that
he's
he's
retired as of
yeah, yeah,
yesterday,
yeah,
right?
emeritus.
So
Yeah,
that's right. So uh, those kind of things are boutique firms. You guys fall in a very interesting place because one of the things that you do, and I'm wondering how you adjust to this model too, is you're kind of in the middle of, it's like sort of like analyst, and I'm distinguishing here somewhat here, thought leader, market research, right? I mean, and the best way to put it, and I'm again distinguishing here again, impact company, meaning you actually have, given your size, an outsized impact.
yeah,
So that requires an enormous workload. It requires a an extensive amount of kind of doing this thing, then doing that thing, then doing this thing, then doing that thing, then back at
yeah,
this thing, finishing that thing, coming over here, fixing that thing, coming
sure,
down here, sending that thing out. Like you're all over the place doing stuff. And the weird thing is, at least from what it looks like, you have to interrupt doing this thing to do this thing, and then get back to doing this thing, and then do that thing. Right. So
yeah,
how do you handle that kind of load? Because it's crazy.
yeah. I would say that because we're still small and you've got a lot of acts, like we do have resources, right? And on numerous levels, right? Like we have account managers and things that can help us set expectations with clients and vendors and things like that. We've got really good, like our kind of marketing and operations support is really awesome. The people that I've gotten to know are amazing. So you kind of know who to go to when you say, hey, like I need to make this change or this needs to, so it does help that there's not like a ton of like bureaucracy or levels or, you know what I mean? And you're kind of like this, there's still a lot of like entrepreneurial spirit inside the organization, so to speak, right? I think it's a little less so than when it was like just Holger and Ray, right? That kind
Right.
of thing. But so in that sense, it's like you're prioritizing and you're making these decisions and Ray's supporting it, right? So that's the one thing is like if it makes sense, yeah, you've got to do that, right? But it's pretty clear. And again, I'm still only a few months in and haven't seen that nth degree of what you're describing.
Right.
Because again, like you've got to be a lot of places, you've got to do a lot of things. But I think what it comes down to is, what Ray has kind of at least told me and what I'm building out for myself is you kind of have like not just your priorities, but kind of like what are the key things that you care about when it comes to like research, messaging, what are your key points? What are your big ideas? We call them. And like my first big idea report is in editing right now. Right. So, and it's, and then it kind of waterfalls from there and then you kind of prioritize from that. And you can kind of see that because what's really great is, again, like we've earned enough cachet and I think enough respect from the vendors where it's like, okay, well, if I need to like delay getting something that I was going to deliver for you, unless it's like time-based, like a webinar or something like that, right? They're going to be okay with it. And then like the end users are like consuming a lot of our stuff. So when that comes out, it kind of comes out, right? And then like the live events and the other things, I think because like I said, you form that big idea, you form your kind of like thesis and the bunch of those in your head. The other things can kind of be done like fairly quickly, and then they become iterations and like theme and variations. And that's kind of how I'm kind of thinking about it, right? And for me, what I'm kind of, prioritizing is like building, what am I, telling the world, like, here's my coverage area, but from a perspective of this is what I'm passionate about and why I think it affects you both on that end user side and both on that, on the vendor side. And I'm in a unique position because I'm really covering go-to-market and growth strategies and things like that right now, where some of the things I'm going to be doing are less about like vendor specific releases and technology and really about, how macro level trends are forcing us to rethink like strategies and process and stuff like that. Right. So I've got this interesting, scenario where I'm going to be doing even more advisory, I think, than even the average analyst, because there's so many companies that are feeling this pressure, right? Some of it's like macro level lag from never actually, flipping your growth strategies after the subscription / post-pandemic / retention, everything as a service, blank economies, and all those big shifts to what is AI/agentic AI? It's moving so fast. How do we inject this into our go-to-market, right? So there's a lot of there's a lot of really interesting opportunity there. So I'm just kind of riding with it and kind of going, where the water flows. But again, I think it's it's a little it can be a little schizophrenic at times because the taffy's being pulled from a number of directions. But I think if you kind of like keep your North Star, it makes it a little easier because you kind of everything kind of flows from like here's who I am as an analyst, here's what I care about, here's the things that here's like kind of like my messaging points of what that matters, and then everything just kind of like tweaks from there. And then obviously there's wrinkles and announcements and other stuff, but I think we're all prolific and good writers. So getting that stuff out, like it's like boom, 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 like we did an internal like Dreamforce debrief thing for ourselves, and it's like this like Google Doc that's like almost as long as a CVS receipt, but it's pretty long.
Well, let me ask you something then, because you actually mentioned something that triggered something a little earlier. You said you're going to be doing more advisory. All right, so my entire I meant you no, but I want to go to that. Look, as an independent, initially when I first started doing all this stuff, because of CRM Speed of Light, I was doing a lot of speaking. And I would say when it came to my income, 80% speaking in the early days, 20% like advisory. And to me back then, advisory was shoot my big New York mouth off, right? Pretty much. And actually, It's still my view on advisory. After a while, I realized how much I liked advisory. And then I kind of flipped it to the point where ultimately it became, if speaking came up, maybe I'd take it, maybe not. But I would take as little speaking as I could when I used to do a lot of speaking. And I wanted to do advisory. And I would carry a load deliberately until 2022 when I started, winding down for retirement. I carried a load of 15 clients a year, advisory clients every year. And pretty much a lot of repeats over decade plus. But I also realized as I grew in that I had to start defining, and this was early on, there was a line between being an analyst and being an advisor. And the way I defined it was, as your advisor, I'm committed to helping your company grow, evolve, correct when necessary. Because of my background in history, I tend to be on a customer advocate. So I will give you that perspective, but I'm also mindful of the fact you're a company and you have things you have to do to be a company. Okay. But as an analyst, and I would tell the companies I worked with this, I may have to publicly skewer you, and I will, regardless of whether we have a contract or not. Right. And I have enough of a history, public history, where I've done exactly that. I still respect the company, but there are times where the public needs to hear, and the company won't respond unless you do something publicly. All right. How do you, Martin Schneider, not you, Constellation analyst, how do you deal with that? Because that's not that easy. And
no, it's not. And I think I think some of the things that make what I want to, what I'm starting advising on and what I'm bringing to Constellation is interesting, because some of it is like, it's your go-to-market, not necessarily your product and your roadmap, like that traditional, because I can do both, right? Because I've got that interesting place of being a CRM, CX, go-to-market person, and being in the product side, being an analyst. So I can do all that, like, hey, here's your roadmap, here's your messaging, here's your visioning. But it's also like, hey, how are you actually going to market as a B2B SaaS cloud, whatever AI vendor, so there's some interesting things where like those things are going to be very separate, right? But I think at the end of the day, if you build enough rapport and respect, and you do it tactfully, and you do it in a way that is saying like, this is, here's the reasons why I think this, not just like, this is bad, right? And you support it when you do it publicly. I think what the vendors have gotten better at, honestly, is preempting the public announcements by talking to us first. And I think they've gotten better at that just as like across the board.
Wait, back up for a minute. When you say that,
is doing advisory with us on their messaging so that they sniff test better than before, when it was like, hey, here's the analyst preview when it's 2 days before like a Dreamforce keynote, or I don't want to use Salesforce as an example. It could be anybody, right? Like a keynote or a press release or whatever. And you're like, and they have no time to make any, do anything with your feedback. Now it's, a lot of the vendors are talking to us specifically, like way ahead of time, right? To better frame the messaging. And make sure that it makes sense, and it's not something that we would skewer, right, publicly. So I think they're recognizing the value of analysts. It's and I've learned that myself too. Like when I had Sarita's job, when I was doing that at Sugar, it was like I was so busy because I was also doing product marketing, I was also doing content marketing. So I bring the analysts in like after everything was baked and be like, what do you think? And we really didn't have the resources or time to change it. And then you guys would give us sometimes a lot of negative feedback and was like, oh, well. But now I think, people are utilizing the analysts more in actual construction of message. Sandy at Zoho does an amazing job of that, and works with us for that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think, I think there's the attitude has changed from back. I think when you were kind of talking about that time, I think that there's a lot of vendors that use us more for advisory than anything else, where you would think like people want to use Constellation as like an amplification engine. Some of them don't reprint our stuff. They don't do it. They just use us for advisory to make sure the message is on point. So I think it's like they're doing a good job of preempting us, possibly publicly skewering them. And it's smart because it's A, they don't have to deal with that, but B, they're getting smart people, they're getting eyes on the message early and often, right? So I think that's what's been really good. And again, I'm not speaking for all vendors, but hopefully maybe ideating, doing some inception for those who aren't to come talk to us, because if we are skewering you, it's probably because you're not talking to us or anyone else, right? So it's like the echo chamber inside and the yes men of it just happens, right? Like I've been on both sides of it, right? So
Yeah, the skewing never has to be nasty. It just has to be.
No, it's not. But it's
public.
Yeah. But it's
right.
I
mean,
it's never
basically.
A good thing to get skewered.
Look, I mean, think about what we do with the watch parties. Brent and I, and I'm as pleasant a human as I may be. I'm still a New Yorker, one way or the other, as you know, and so consequently, if I think something's off, I'll say it. Right. Like, let me give an example without mentioning names. A few years ago, during COVID, I was called in for a messaging for a major event. And one of the customer references that they were going to use publicly, one of the customers they're going to talk about, was just absolutely tone deaf. I mean, it's so tone deaf, it was staggering. And I told them that in the discussion. And they said, well, CEO really likes this company. I don't know if we're going to drop it. Right. And I said to them, look, I'm your advisor. I said, and as your advisor, I highly recommend that you drop this, regardless of whether the CEO likes it or not. I said, now, because I really do love you guys, as an analyst, I'm going to tell you something, that if we're going to do a watch party, and if this customer shows up, I will publicly skewer you. So I'm giving you notice in advance. And the customer showed up and I publicly skewered them. Now, that was advisor and I was basically warning them against me. Right. But not just me, because everybody on that broadcast, all the analysts on it and all the comments in it, publicly skewered them for that. And it was poorly received generally too. You can't parade wealth, right, in front of people who can't afford what you're parading, right? And no,
I'd argue this company still does that a little bit.
They do that.
Yeah, they may have done it fairly recently.
They did, and that will be discussed tomorrow.
Yeah, Yeah, and there's you can slice and dice it two ways. You could say, "Hey, stop doing all this B2C stuff for a company that's 95% B2B in the customer base, and also stop with the luxury brands." But,
Right. The luxury brand thing, that's a general rule for companies. Look,
yes.
there's this organization called the Luxury Institute. It's run by Milton Pedraza, and I've known him for 2 decades almost. I mean, not well, but we know each other, and he's read, Serum Speed of Light, and that's how I met him originally. He reached out, and they basically have a CRM product. Oddly, even though they're not a tech company, they're actual more of a association.
Mhm.
For luxury brands, and it's
Yeah,
a
I'm
good
familiar with them, yeah.
it's actually a very smart group of people, and they do
Yeah, they
good
bring
work.
out some really cool research,
Yeah,
like
they do, and they're
pointing out
really,
that luxury prices increase during a recession.
yeah.
Because like
These guys
yeah,
they're very smart, and they've nailed their area.
yeah, they're
Um,
really good.
but I think they play a really good role in terms of helping companies understand those brands, but those brands are rarely, very rare, should be brought out as the attributable brand at an event that people who look, we're in the tech world, so there's nobody in that audience who's poor. Let's just put it that way,
Sure, sure, sure.
right? They certainly make more than the bulk of the universe.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like, yeah, like if you sit in like a a Oracle or Salesforce keynote, it's billions of dollars in salaries
Oh my
sitting there.
God, maybe, yeah, many billions of
It could be
dollars.
like a trillion. It's a room
Right.
of $1 trillion.
A room of global GDP combined. Right.
Exactly.
Right. So, but I will tell you though, even in that audience, you don't parade luxury brands, right? You don't certainly don't parade your own wealth.
Yeah.
Right. You just never do that. I don't care whether you want to or not, whether you're proud of what you have. Look, everybody likes having luxury stuff. Who doesn't? Right.
Yeah.
There's the emotional part of it. It makes you feel good. Right. It makes you feel, plus it's a reasonable bet that the stuff's of high quality for whatever it is. Meaning,
Yeah.
if it's a mechanical thing, it's put together extremely well. If it's a perfume, it's captivating for whoever wants to use it, blah, 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 blah. But you never parade it. And that's parade. If you mention it, you're parading it.
Yeah. Even the brands themselves don't do it that way. When you look at their advertising, they're like in the desert, like there's no one around.
Yeah, that's
Is
the
that
weird
like-
thing. But yeah, those are the
No, but it does it because it's the same,
Charlize Theron in the desert or in a pool by herself.
Yeah,
Right.
or like they're pretending to be cowboys, like when
Yeah.
people wear this stuff, out in Michelin-starred restaurants. No one's
Right.
wearing those clothes or that jewelry or that cologne out
That's right.
herding cattle,
At Per Se, or at the French Laundry.
Fresh laundry. Yeah, exactly.
Right. No, that's what I mean. So I wish vendors would get smart in that. They all kind of do it because mostly the people
You want
running
marquee brands, you want noticeable brands, and you want
that,
it to be
yeah,
like,
but you know
these
what?
people could
I'll
pick
tell you
anyone
what,
and they picked us.
pick a damn sports team. You'll be better off. There's nobody at any level that's going to say no to that. Nobody.
Yes. Well, yeah, no, yeah. SAP
I
did
thought
an
about that a
interesting,
lot.
thing
You
with,
want
with the
marquee
Sharks
stuff?
yesterday.
Look, sports will sell a lot more for
Yeah.
you than perfume like Louis Vuitton will, right? Sports
Yeah.
will sell for you, right? Because it's teams.
Yeah.
Go bring the
Well, there's a
Golden
good
State
story
Warriors
there.
out.
Well, there's such a good story there because you've got, sports teams have to deal with like so many different factors when it comes to business, right? And what did the one guy say? Like, I don't know if you were on SAP's call yesterday where they had the
No.
Sharks, the San Jose Sharks.
I
It
don't
was
talk
really
to him.
interesting.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know Jonathan Becker extremely well. He's a good
But it's
friend.
the idea of like, what did they say? Most business to business people are trying to like turn like customers into like fans. He's like, we're trying to turn fans into customers. Like,
Yeah,
and
well,
create
that's
loyalty.
been my mind. They stole
That's
me
pretty-
from that one, right?
But I mean, but that story is
interesting.
interesting, right? And then you've got because there's B2B angles of it, there's supplier angles, there's partner angles, there's loyalty angles. Sports teams are great, and it's the same stuff as a luxury brand, but people align. Everybody can get into a sports.
Well, I mean, sports in the fundamental sense, even though the pricing kind of pricing this out of it, but when it basically, if you look at sports like baseball or football or whatever, when it boils down to it, it's always been a kind of I'll call it a blue collar thing. It's like everyone at any level, the middle class,
it's inclusive.
or as I used to say when I was young, the working class and the petty bourgeoisie, right? When I was a kid. But though the anyone, you're rooting for a team that you love because of where you live or for some other reason, a player or whatever. But you grew up loving it, right? Somehow, right? And that is far more. But I did not grow up loving Louis Vuitton sneakers. Right, I didn't even care or not. For me, whatever sneakers I had was fine. It was kids.
I did grow up wanting a Rolex Submariner, though.
I didn't
because you know why? Because they had the ads in National Geographic magazine, and because it gave me that, because that was like really good advertising, right?
To me, the Submariner was DC. It was DC or Marvel comic.
The comic, the superhero.
I think it was DC with Submariner, right? So anyway, look, we're kind of out of time, but that was pretty awesome, man. I loved it. I mean, I think you're a great addition to Constellation. I think that I'm just glad you're there. It also means, even though I'm out of the Dreamforce was my last big conference. I've got Zoom coming up in the beginning of October, and then I've got user testing, which is really Brent and I are doing an engagement there at the end of October. And other than paid engagements for PPN or CRM players at conferences, I am finished with the circuit.
Wow.
Yeah, it's over.
We're gonna miss you out there, man. It was like anytime I went to like the welcome reception, it's like find Brent and Paul, and then everything will be okay.
Yeah, well,
because I'm the most extroverted introvert anyone's ever met. So.
Yeah, I'm the same. Well, no, that's the thing.
Which is why going all the way back to that first night, finding someone to talk to at that NetSuite dinner.
That was amazing. I just remember. I actually have a vivid memory, and interestingly enough, even to the point of you and I having part of our conversation standing up at our respective seats at the table that we were like, there was this table, and
it was a round table,
and you were this is probably that guy from the Chronicle was on our table too on the other side. This guy who melted when he saw Mei Li. You were standing. So if you're looking at it from our perspective, we're on the top of the table, right? From our perspective now, and you're kind of on the right, and I'm on the left, and meaning I'm on your right. And we should have been sitting, but we were so animated by discussion. We're literally just standing by our chairs talking, and we continued to talk till basically, without her saying it directly, Mei Li said, "Sit down." Right. But she didn't say it that way, but she said, "Okay, we're going to get started." And we sat.
Yeah.
But everyone else was seated, but you and me standing and talking because it was so animated. I'll never forget it. All right. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you. And
it has been, as always, a wonderful and great pleasure.
As always. Thanks.
Well, that's it for today. I have been contacted by Sarita, so we will have her, if she's available, on our next show. Some confusion. I think it was my fault, although I'm still trying to figure out what I did. I mean, I know what I did, but I'm trying to figure out how I did it. I can't even imagine. But anyway, thank you so much for coming. And of course, the good news is it gave us more time to talk to Martin. So we'll be back in, let's see, this is actually the next time. I can't be exact because of I'm going to that conference at the end of the month, and I have to see what days the last Wednesday is of October. I'll find out. But given that, anyway, I will let you know. Just know that our analyst guest will be Sarita Kincaid, the VP of Corporate Communications at SugarCRM, which means she covers analyst relations and public relations. And until then, whatever date it is, I will see you. Fast up, broken into two. I didn't know I was pretty till I took a look at you, and I'm rolling. Yeah, I'm still rolling. Baby, there ain't nothing I can lose, and I still got the blues that I'm rolling. Hey!
This has been a Players Productions Network digital broadcast.